Hello, my name is Dr. Hiral Patel. I have over 12 years of experience providing mental health services. This includes providing individual and group therapy to homeless population while my time in California. Additionally, I've worked with immigrant survivors of trauma, specifically providing immigration evaluations such for asylum seekers, U visa petitioners, T visa petitioners, also cancellation of removal and extreme hardships. Right now, I have a private practice in Ada and Portland called Horizon Psychological Services. I work with adults and I also provide immigration evaluations. I'm also trained in EMDR and clinical hypnotherapy.
And I'm Michele Figuero. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I have extensive experience in training working with LGBTQ populations. Got a lot of that experience through North Kent Guidance and Testing Services here in Grand Rapids at their LGBT center. I also work with trauma populations. I'm also trained in EMDR, but I work at Health for Life Grand Rapids as a contractor there. I also have my own practice in Kalamazoo, Mind Renewal Counseling Services. And so I provide HRT, hormone replacement therapy, letters, referral letters, as well as for surgeries for transgender individuals. And so to get started here, today we're going to talk a little bit about describing the difference, just briefly, about from PTSD to complex PTSD, and how marginalized groups in the USA experience trauma stressors through discrimination and some of the other factors we're going to talk about, and how those are connected to trauma, how those symptoms show up. We're also going to talk about, through an experiential activity, hopefully gain a better understanding of what individuals in these groups go through and how we can bring that into our clinical practice. So, as Joshua went over earlier, trauma, it is an experience, a series of experiences and or impacts from social conditions that break or betray our inherent need for safety, belonging, and or dignity. That is how Stacey Haynes in her book, Politics of Trauma, describes trauma. And I sometimes verbalize to my clients that it can be anything that shifts or shapes how an individual views themselves, others, and the world in an unhealthy or unrealistic way. And this can be intentional or unintentional. So whether someone tripped with a knife and stabbed you or did it maliciously and intentionally, you're wounded, and that wound is the trauma that needs to be healed. And so currently the DSM-5 does contain a diagnosis for PTSD, or the statistics for that diagnosis, but not complex PTSD yet, but the ICD, the International Classification of Diseases, edition 11, does. And just very briefly here, we're gonna see more on the next slide, but PTSD often describes like those very large single or sometimes more than one experiences that are threatening, car crash, sexual assault, natural disaster, combat, those kind of violent acts that can really make a large impact. And how I give clients a visualization of that is, that's kind of like a large gallon of water, right? That if you pour it into the sand, it's very visible, it makes an impact. People can easily identify these things as traumatic. Complex PTSD, this is exposure to varied and multiple threatening events, usually prolonged, repetitive, from which one is very difficult or impossible to escape. And these are often of an invasive and interpersonal nature. So these could be, like Josh went over earlier, the things that we would see on that ACEs study. Neglect, could be bullying, could be verbal abuse in the household, or prolonged abuse as a child, whether it's sexual, physical, verbal, things of that nature. And if you look on the scale here, on this chart, the top portion is those things that we typically see for PTSD, the nightmares, flashbacks, avoidance of either people or thoughts, hypervigilance, startle response. The bottom three, though, are the things that would usually show up with the complex PTSD. So feelings are easily hurt, uncontrollable burst of anger, numbness, and they're now considering dissociation as part of that. Negative self-concept. How often do we see that in our clients, right? That feeling inferior to others, feelings of guilt, feelings of worthlessness. And then interpersonal problems, very self-conscious, feeling detached, not feeling connected to others. And so we want you, as we're going through this presentation, to consider how the factors that we're going to talk about and the things you experience during this game, how those things can show up and present themselves in these manners in a client that might be sitting across from you, and how that could resonate as trauma. And even though we're going over the specifics of these diagnoses here, individuals can experience trauma that does not result or qualify for a diagnosis of PTSD or C-PTSD, but they still have trauma that needs to be addressed.
So when we're talking about trauma, it is really important to talk about marginalized populations. So Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines marginalization as to put or keep someone in a powerless or unimportant position within a society or group. So it's an essentially exclusion of individuals and communities based on certain identifying characteristics such as race, gender, class, and age, and so on. And marginalization is a result of discrimination. It's a result of discrimination and exclusion from various rights, opportunities, and resources that are normally available to other group. And that group is usually the group in position of power and privilege. And not only marginalization not only affects individuals and communities' mental and physical health, it also prevents marginalized individuals from meaningful participation in society, leading to negative cascading effects. So let's get a little more interactive. Which groups are marginalized in the United States? So I would like to hear from audience, from online participants.
There are many, so feel free to share one that comes to mind.
Hispanics.
Hispanics.
Latinos, yes?
Children.
Yes, children? Absolutely. Other ones?
Female.
Women, yes.
Yes, females.
Elderly,
Elderly population as well, yes.
African American, people with disability.
Black Americans, individuals with disability.
Cognitively impaired.
Absolutely, cognitively and intellectually impaired. So there are many more marginalized groups, and here's a slide. Here's some more examples of marginalized individuals in the society today. And Michele will talk about the factors that influence, that negatively impact them.
Okay, so briefly, just for the sake of time, there's courseworks full of material that we could go over on all of these. And so we're just going to focus today on systemic racism and microaggressions. Other factors that can play in are historical trauma, which are those large-scale traumas that have oppressed a certain group, usually on racial or ethnic or some other identity, and that can contribute to transgenerational trauma, trauma factors experienced by generations that never actually experienced the actual historical trauma. And examples of the historical trauma would be slavery, violent oppression of indigenous populations, the Holocaust, things of that nature. And epigenetics, I'm sure you've heard it mentioned throughout a few of the other presentations here, is really how one of the reasons that they believe that may happen, why transgenerational trauma may happen, is because that genetic code is altered and carried on through those generations. But also poverty, limited or lack of access to resources, and this can tie to systemic racism, why certain populations are more prone to experience things like poverty, so that lack of access or limited access to healthcare, nutritious foods, education, mental health resources. So again, a brief look at factors, but we're going to hone in on a couple of them.
Yeah. Thanks, Michele. So before we go into talking about systemic racism, it's important to identify individual racism. So individual racism refers to beliefs, attitudes, and actions of individuals that stem from conscious or unconscious personal prejudice. And this can be old-fashioned racism, where it is more blatant, or it could be more aversive, where an individual holds consciously egalitarian values but is unaware of their prejudiced or racist attitudes that are shaped by their implicit biases. Individual racism is connected to and learned from broader socioeconomic histories, and it is reinforced by systemic racism. Now we'll look into systemic racism. Systemic racism is a theory that was developed by sociologist Joe Fegan. He developed it to explain significance of racism and race in the history and in today's world. Systemic racism is denial of privileges, opportunities, freedoms, rewards to people of color by social, political, and economic structures and institutions. So there's no individual or overt discrimination necessary with systemic racism because it functions on systemic level, not an individual level. So some of the examples of systemic racism is, well, systemic oppression would be the wage disparities we have right now based on race and gender. So according to census data, women of all races earned less than 18% compared to all men of all races in 2018. One of the big examples is redlining, and redlining is where Black Americans were denied mortgage loans outside of certain areas. And these areas were outlined by, with a red ink by bankers and realtors, and Black people were unable to buy properties outside of these lines, which prevented them from accumulating, building on their savings and wealth. Not only it affected their wealth, it also, because of those areas had low tax rate, it limited their resources, various resources, including one of the biggest resources, which is education, availability of education for their children. And that which led to another, which is what we face right now, another systemic racism issue of achievement gap. I'm sure most of you guys have heard of that term. Achievement gap is disparities in academic achievement, standardized test scores, dropout rates, graduation rates between students of color and their white counterparts. So to illustrate how systemic racism works and what it feels like to have that experience, we are going to play a special kind of Monopoly.
All right, and so we're going to take just a moment to switch the camera around here so people online can have this experience vicariously. And as we're doing that, for people online, since you can't play COVID in a perfect world without COVID, we would have a game board at every table. Everyone would be here in person. However, for this, you are, I'm going to ask that birthdays between January and April, you just kind of watch as if you're playing as a hat, okay, as the hat token. May through August, I would like you to view it as you are the dog token. And September through December, I would like you to play it as you are a car token. We will have 3 individuals in this room actually being the players. And we have, I'm not sure that, so yes, we do have 3 people. The person who wins will actually walk away with a $10 Starbucks card, so there is an actual takeaway from this. And if you will please, the individuals we have in this room, if you feel safe, we do have gloves and masks, and we are socially distanced at this table. We also have wipes. If you will please just come around this table right here. You each have rules in your bag, and I'm going to read them aloud so that the individuals online can see this as well, can understand what's happening. So, we have the hat, which is this lady right here. And what is your name? Stephanie. Okay, Stephanie is the hat, and hats, you are allowed to play Monopoly by the regular rules. You'll hear, I want you to pay attention though to the other people's rules, because you will get to do things, additional things as well. Dogs, what is your name, ma'am? Julie, okay. Julie, you are allowed to play by the regular rules. However, at any point during the first 5 turns, and a turn is 1 complete time around the board, the hat can demand all of your property and all but $200 of your cash. So you will only keep 200 of it. Hats, you may make this demand once, just once, and after that, you will get to play by the regular rules. So that's your responsibility. Within the first 5 turns, you can take all of her property she's accumulated and all but 200 of her dollars. Cars. What is your name, sir? Roland. Roland. You start the game with $200. For the first 5 turns, you are allowed to have no more than $200 at a time. Any additional money must be given to the hat. So if you draw any through the community chest or anything else, you must give it to Stephanie. You're not allowed to buy property for the first 5 turns, and in the 6th and 7th turn, you are allowed to buy property, but only between this red-lined area, okay? Between go and jail. And after the 7th turn, if you make it that far, you may play by the normal rules of Monopoly. So, we are going to have to get started.
On the
And-
dice roller.
Yes, we have our dice roller here.
This way that we're not transmitting germs.
Yes.
So you just tell me when you want me to roll the dice.
Go ahead and roll. This will be for Stephanie.
Okay. 7.
All right, Stephanie, go ahead and put, yep. All right, and if you haven't played before, great.
Okay, advance to boardwalk.
Advance to boardwalk. All right, now you have the chance to buy that property. You have a good bit of money there. Would you like to do that?
Yes.
Okay, and so I'm going to be giving you the boardwalk deed, and you get, what, $100 back? Okay. Go ahead, Paul, and roll for the next.
6.
Oriental Avenue.
Oriental Avenue, would you like to purchase that?
Not in the red district, thank you.
Not in the red district, okay. All right, and for the, yep, roll ahead, roll again.
11.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, what property is that?
St. Charles Place.
St. Charles Place, would you like to purchase? That's going to be $100. Wait, what is that?
140.
140, so would you like to, you have 200 to start, so would you like to purchase that property for 140?
No.
No, okay. Yeah, oh, I'm sorry, yeah, you can't purchase in the first 5 anyways, you're correct, so, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next roll? Okay.
Next roll's a hat.
We have 10.
Connecticut Avenue. Would you like that
I
one?
will buy that. And also I pass go.
You did pass go, so you get 200.
There's money bags over there.
Sounds like a hit.
All right.
Did you hear me?
What, Miss Moneybags? Yeah. Yeah, it's easy for her to buy, right? She started out with a lot. Well, they both did.
Next roll is 11.
11.
Apparently I'm good at rolling.
Community chest.
Get out of jail free.
A get out of jail free card. Perfect. All right, for the cars.
7.
All right, and we're not able to purchase, so we'll move on. This is that was the second round.
12.
She rolled a 12 on Kentucky Avenue.
I will buy it.
Okay, she will buy it. Get another deed. 180.
220.
220, okay, thank you.
This one plus 180.
Oh, okay, thank you.
3.
Free parking, okay. Nothing there.
8.
All right. And that completes our third round, still can't purchase. Back to hats.
Back to hats. 6.
260 for Ventnor.
Boy, that really hurt.
Okay.
6.
Okay, and there's nothing there if you had purchased, if you'd been able to purchase.
I have to pay her rent though.
Oh, she
She's next.
purchased on
Oh,
that
she's
one,
not-
Ventnor,
oh,
yeah.
okay, that's-
But he was not able to actually purchase that, so he doesn't have the funds. He could have been making some profit there, but he's not able.
5,
All right, and cats again.
7,
Now, is this the 5th round?
Yes,
Okay.
I will buy them, I guess I need to demand all of her money, except for $200, right?
If you want to now, you can, yeah.
so wait,
Yeah, I'm
can you
gonna
say
have
that louder?
Yeah, so she's making her demand now that she gets to take all of her property and all of her money except for $200. So you get to keep it and go ahead and hand her all of that.
I had more than, I thought I should have bought that property, but I wanted to save some for you since that's the only place you can buy. There you go.
Will you go ahead and repeat what you said?
Oh, I said, had I known I had so much money, I might have bought that property, but I also wanted to save some for this gentleman because that's the only place he can buy.
Ah, okay. Well, it doesn't matter, the Hats have it now, so.
Yeah. The hat's gonna own everything anyway.
Wait, can you repeat that too?
I just said the hat's gonna own everything.
Yeah, there's kind of that seems to be the rules. So, go ahead and it's your turn now.
$320 for Pennsylvania, I just.
Oh, okay, wanted to buy Pennsylvania.
Okay, so you're gonna roll for me.
Oh, I'm rolling, okay. I will roll if it's a 6.
North Carolina, only 300.
I only have 800.
She only has 200 now, so, well, she will not get to buy.
6,
Luxury tax, $100. Thank you.
That hurt. You have no luxury to tax.
So that was the 5th round. So now the 6th round, cars you get to start buying if you want in the red line district.
Okay.
Okay.
5.
On my own property.
She landed on her own property, so she owes nothing.
11,
11 for the dogs. Oh, that's the car. Connecticut Avenue, would you like to buy it?
You know, I will, and also I would like my 200 for passing go.
Oh, yep, 200 for passing go. 200, and then you get 80 back.
Thank you, Ned.
Okay, so 200 for go and then 80 back for,
Okay.
and then which property was this?
Connecticut.
Connecticut. Oh, she,
Did you already buy Connecticut?
yeah, she did buy Connecticut, so you get that back and you owe her money.
Red.
Okay, well, can you break here, 20.
There you go. Okay, so the Hats have started to collect rent money now.
Ready to roll?
And we'll do, a few more here.
8,
Oh, and you have landed on Boardwalk, so you owe her rent. Rent is 50. How much are you down to now? You're down to 40.
Yeah,
$40. All right, and what time are we going till? 15 after?
What's that?
$50.
I believe so.
Okay,
Yeah.
we'll do one more round and then we'll do our processing.
There's 2 of
6,
Hats get 6. The railroad for 200.
them. She just got 200 for passing go.
And she did get 200, so yep, there we go.
11,
Oh, that's me.
Free park.
Now, see, we used to put all the money in here, and if you land on a free parking, you got it.
Oh,
You know, if
That's
somebody
right.
bought something,
that might be, yeah.
but not that they're playing, right?
10,
Oh, and,
Yeah, Yeah,
You
mine-
would have been able to purchase if you wanted, but you're on her,
$8.
yep, rent,
Oh, I got 200.
and you do get to. All right. So this would go on a little bit further, but just for time's sake, we're gonna just, I think you guys can see kind of what's starting here, and we are going to, actually, let's leave it here for processing real quick. So what was this experience like for each of you? I'll share the microphone here. What was that like for you, Hats?
It was a great experience knowing that I was set up to win.
Right, and you started, yeah, and what was that like for you, Dogs?
Did you feel guilty at all?
Yes.
All right, good question. What was your experience playing that?
Well, I thought my daughter should have showed a little compassion. But I also didn't mind it so much because I knew as long as I passed go, I was still going to get some money coming in.
Okay. All right, so you still got to benefit from some of the rules, right? Even though you suffered a hard loss at one point.
Right.
Cara, what was that like for you?
It was super frustrating. It felt humiliating at times. Like, no power. It was, yeah, it was difficult.
Yeah, you weren't able to play by the same rules, and that,
Exactly.
yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask,
So we gotta shoot.
how do you think you would have went if we continued playing?
Not well.
Would you have been able to accumulate your wealth, as much wealth as Stephanie?
Absolutely not. No.
But eventually, after 5 turns, you still got to start playing by the same rules. So,
Right.
but can you tell me a little bit more about why you think that wouldn't have eventually equaled out?
Well, because how I started off, it was just that, you know, everything was unbalanced, and I didn't have enough resources to, when, you know, I am allowed to operate with the same rules, I just don't have enough to be able to make it or compete or anything.
Absolutely.
I didn't feel that way, but I wasn't as much of a disadvantage as you. Although you did steal over $200 of my dollars, but because I felt like eventually if I could, you know, buy some things like the railroads and stuff, I could eventually climb my way back.
Okay.
What if, like, maybe you could just repeat that?
Yeah.
What if one of you two had landed in jail?
Yeah, what do you think would have happened if one of you, these pawns, the dogs or a car, had landed in jail? Do you feel like you would have been as likely to get out? You would have to pay $50 or have a card, which you did. You had the community chest card, but what do you think that would have been like?
Yeah, it would be, you'd feel kind of helpless, powerless, stuck. Yeah, and pretty soon I wouldn't have this much money, so I'd probably be stuck there for a while.
Right, okay. Anything else? Any other processing questions?
Yeah, Stephanie, do you mind?
And actually, Stephanie does win the $10 Starbucks card. Congratulations, Stephanie. How do you feel about that?
Winning the Starbucks card makes me feel guilty.
Guilty
Yeah, why?
enough to return?
Yeah, guilty enough to give it to someone else? She says, sure, that's great. But yeah, any other thoughts or from you?
I don't have any thoughts about my role. I mean, I understand that my role is where everything's handed to you and you feel as though you've accomplished something. I think that's a little bit more difficult to feel in this game.
Sure.
Metaphor, but I definitely get it. I was gonna say, you know, with your role, you know, you were saying you weren't as disadvantaged, so you felt as though you could eventually start buying properties and climb your way up, although he couldn't buy any property that was worth anything, or
Although
the
at this
collect
point
rent.
you can't, or is this my zone for the whole game?
My understanding. That-
Just for the first few, like
Yeah.
the 6 and 7 turns.
Okay, so then eventually you could buy outside of
Okay,
that.
right. Right, but at that point,
If I could afford it.
Yeah.
Right, if you could afford it.
Go a lot of times.
and if they weren't taken up, because as you can see, right.
Yeah.
So anyways, this is a very rough, example of, just to get a concept across, and we're gonna talk a little bit more about how this applies now, and yeah, as we go back to the podium. All right, and so we are back up here. So now we're going to talk a little bit about microaggressions. Those are those subtle everyday interactions and behaviors that imply to somebody, again, usually of a marginalized group, that, you know, there is something different about you, or maybe you're not quite good enough, things of that nature. And though not all microaggressions are life-threatening, they can definitely be evasive. So kind of going back to that, the PTSD, like the large water going into the sand, and complex trauma being those small, subtle drops of water, you know, again and again, repeated over time. Which one can be more evasive, right? If you are looking at decades of small drops of water versus just a one-time dumping of a large gallon, it's usually these small things that really do erode. And so we're gonna look at a few videos here of how microaggressions, first of all, just what they look like, and then kind of what they feel like if they were to be reversed.
For people who still don't think that microaggressions are a problem,
Oh, you're so well spoken.
oh, just imagine, instead of being a stupid comment, a microaggression is a mosquito bite.
Ugh, it's a compliment.
Mosquito bites and their itch are one of nature's most annoying features. But if you're only bitten every once in a while,
No, where are you really from?
Cleveland.
sure, it's annoying, but it's not that big a deal. The problem is that some people get bitten by mosquitoes a lot more than other people. I mean, a lot more. Whether it's on a date,
Oh, your English is so good.
Excuse me?
going grocery shopping,
You know, everything happens for a reason.
commuting to work,
So when are you gonna have a baby?
watching TV,
We have to keep the Redskins' name part of our culture and history.
or just walking down the street with your partner.
I couldn't even tell you were gay.
Mosquitoes seem to pop up everywhere.
Do you know John? He be shopping at I live here too.
And getting bit by mosquitoes every goddamn day,
Sorry for the
multiple times a day,
Pretty, can I touch your hair?
is fucking annoying. That makes you want to go ballistic on those mosquitoes, which seems like a huge overreaction to people who only get bit every once in a while.
It's just a mosquito bite, who cares?
Just another angry black woman.
Of course, beyond just being annoying, some mosquitoes carry truly threatening diseases that can mess up your life for years.
Astrophysics? Maybe you should try this challenging major.
Ah, my dreams.
And other mosquitoes carry strains that can even kill you.
It looked like you was up for trouble, okay? I felt right.
So next time you think someone's overreacting, just remember, some people experience mosquito bites all the time.
You're all so exotic, wow.
And by mosquito bites, we mean microaggressions.
And one more.
It should be loaded right. Hit.
So you're not good at golf, but you're white.
Do you want to explain this?
People of color have to deal with racial microaggressions every single day. So microaggressions are those little unintentional insults that basically see people of color as stereotypes, which got me thinking, what if white people had to deal with racial microaggressions?
So like, where are you from? No, like, where are you really from?
Why don't you have an accent? Like a Swedish accent.
You know, your English is really, really good. It's like I can't even tell you have an accent or anything.
I don't have an accent.
No, that's what I'm saying. You don't speak Gaelic?
You don't speak German?
Can you say a curse word in European?
You know, like, what does that even mean?
Hey Connor, you know about NASCAR stuff, right? Can you take a look at this?
Can you teach me how to line dance?
Play a banjo?
Act entitled in the supermarket. Love white food. No real flavor to it. Never an upset tummy.
You're so exotic.
How do you get your hair like that? I love how it's so limp. Ew, why does it feel like that? Oh my god, so it just does that? No, you are really pretty for a white girl.
Your eyes are so round, like this.
You know who you look like? Kenny Chesney. Zach Braff.
Emma Stone.
Rachel Maddow. My friend Chad. Maybe you know him. He's white too.
No, Emma Watson.
Not Macklemore. What's the other guy?
Is it Emma Thompson?
It's C-H-A-D, like Chad.
One of the Emmas. You look like an Emma.
You know who you look like? I bet you hear this all the time. Jeffrey Dahmer. How does it feel to be the token white guy in the office? Hey, Connor, can we get a white perspective on this? I love everything about white culture. You guys are like so fun. What do you mean you don't don't listen to Creed. You're white.
You've never tried meth. But you're white.
You don't act like a normal white person.
You're not really white, though.
You're not really white. I'm whiter than you are.
So, did all your ancestors own slaves?
No, but of course he wishes that he could still own slaves. That's a part of his culture.
Bryce, back me up on this one. The thing you have to understand about white culture
No, I
is
went
that
to
white
a
people are...
historically white college, so
Okay,
I know
but
about
I
white culture.
backpacked
It was
in
a-
Europe.
So can you see how ridiculous this was? I know. Story of my life. If you've ever experienced microaggressions because of your race, gender, sexuality, or body type, go ahead and vent about it in the comments.
All right, so as you can see, this was just an example to help us, along with the game, kind of understand what individuals sitting across from us in the therapy room may have to deal with, and what would that look like? How would that shape their ideas about themselves, others, and the world, right, over time? And talking about the effects of discrimination, Hiral's going to go into that a little bit more deeply here.
Right. So effects of discrimination on marginalized groups, as Michele and other presenters have been talking about. Some of those symptoms include fear, hypervigilance, headache, insomnia, body aches, memory difficulties, self-blame, confusion, shame, and guilt. And these are like some of them are somatic as well as mental symptoms. One of the biggest effects of discrimination is internalized oppression. And internalized oppression is believing and making it part of your image the myths and misinformation that society, predominantly groups that are in position of power and privilege, communicate to you about your group. And when people internalize these messages, these myths and misinformation, that can cause them to feel that in some way they are inherently unworthy, ugly, not good enough, intelligent, and so on. And this happens usually as an unconscious process. So some of the examples of internalized oppression is Black and brown people using skin lightening products, skin bleaching products. Also, Asian person getting an eyelid surgery. I know there was like a famous news anchor who got her eyes done so they can appear more whiter because apparently her producer told her that you don't seem trustworthy enough. So that's why she had to get that done. So these are internalized, or an immigrant. I'm myself an immigrant, and I know a lot of Indian Asians, they believe that like if you have an accent, then you won't fit in. Or that if you don't speak English well enough, then you're not smart. And these messages we internalize these messages, and they continue to affect us, and society continues to reinforce these messages society reinforces these messages. You hear it on radio, TV, news channels, people around you. And Michelle's going to talk more about these themes in detail.
Yeah, and we have a doll study here. I'm sure some of you are familiar with the doll study. We just have to switch back over real quick to the video portion.
Escape, and then go no, here. Let's do it's faster.
Should I talk about it while you're...
Yeah, go ahead and talk about it. Oh, here it is.
Okay. I'll talk about it after.
I should be able to see that.
In Brown versus Board of Education, the famous case that desegregated school in the 1950s, Dr. Kenneth Clark conducted a doll test with Black children. He asked them to choose between a black doll and a white doll. In most instances, the majority of the children preferred the white doll. I decided to reconduct this test as Dr. Clark did to see how we've progressed since then. Can you show me the doll that you like best or that you like to play with? That one? I like to play with this. And can you show show me the doll that is the nice doll? And why is that the nice doll?
He's white.
And can you show me the doll that looks bad? Okay. And why does that look bad?
Because it's black.
And why do you think that's a nice doll?
Because she's white.
And can you give me the doll that looks like you? "15 out of the 21 children preferred the white doll."
All right, we're back to go.
Thank you. We should be good.
Keep going, you can talk.
Yeah, so this study, this doll study, original study was conducted by Kenneth and Mamie Clark in 1940s, and this was a recreation of that study by a high school student in Tampa Bay. I think it was done in 2007 because they wanted to talk about it as that it's still relevant, even though in 1940s the Clark study allowed the desegregation of school, but these themes continue to play out in Black Americans' lives, not just Black American, all marginalized populations' lives. And Michele will talk about those additional themes that play out in our lives.
Yeah, and so you could see on this next slide some of the things that you guys mentioned in the Monopoly game. I think Roland, the car, had said, you know, I am powerless, I'm kind of helpless, I can't really succeed, right? What's the point? So themes related to control can show up, feelings of responsibility, I did something wrong, I should have done something different, or I am something wrong. Like in that video, you know, I am ugly, I am bad, and you know, it was an immediate response quite often without thinking. These are children, and they've learned that from somewhere. You know, if we look at 80s and 90s films, there's definite correlation between certain colors or kinds of dress, or you know, a lot of factors going on there. What is good, what is bad, and or just lack of representation in general in the media. We're getting better with that in our TV shows, our movies, our advertising, and yet those little messages again and again through overt or covert, right, by including or not including certain populations, what does that say to an individual? And these can contribute to those complex trauma themes in their life. So a few just real life stories. These individuals gave me permission to share basics. I had a woman who was a client of mine. She had left an abusive marriage with a man. She had always known that she was gay, but thought marriage could heal that in her. It did not. She left and eventually did marry a woman, and she experienced a lot of discrimination. She was a prominent figure in the medical community in Grand Rapids. She was in a faith-based hospital system that let her go for her sexual identity. She went from 6 figures down to much less, and so eventually her and her wife were trying to buy a house in a suburb. The courts would not allow her to move a certain amount of mileage. It was very short, a lot shorter than most divorced couples, because this judge had literally pronounced in the courtroom his feelings about her sexual identity. And so they looked at a house, she looked at a house alone the day before closing. The couple selling the house found out this was a same-sex couple buying the house, and literally said, we cannot subject our community to this lifestyle, and did not go through with the sale. That left this couple, my client and her children, homeless for over a month. And instead of being able to purchase a house where they could pay a reasonable mortgage and build equity, they had to move in a $2,300 a month apartment downtown Grand Rapids, where they are now really struggling. And so this is very, you know, alive and well today. And another one of my clients is a natal-born female, identifies as transgender male, and went to a therapist prior to myself. That therapist was uninformed, or whatever, I'm not sure what was going on with him, but he had told the client that they just had not had enough sexual experiences yet to know if they liked their parts, and encouraged them to have more sexual experiences to see if I guess they vibed with it eventually. That really set this client back, went through some suicide, ideation, depression, and eventually doing better now on HRT, moving forward with his life. So I wanted to bring these things up to realize the power, the influence that we have on individuals' lives, and how to look for these themes and the real factors that might be contributing to them.
So continuing on the effects of discrimination. So lack of acknowledgement and accountability from social and political structures make it difficult for a person who has been marginalized to move towards healing because they're not being seen, their experiences are not being validated. It's really hard, and I'm sure you guys can see some of that in our political climate today. It also makes it difficult from healing from other past traumas, childhood traumas that they may have experienced, or like past history of sexual assault or domestic violence, and so on. Experiences of discrimination also increases your susceptibility to develop additional mental health problems, and it also negatively impacts one's ability to succeed and function. Their sense of agency is negatively affected, their sense of self-worth, their self-efficacy, their ability to overcome obstacles also get affected. And it also triggers past memories of discrimination as well, and further re-traumatizing them. So we have some statistics here for you, mental health statistics. Because of the time constraint, we will not be going into those, but feel free to look at those. Again, when we're talking about marginalized populations, it is critical to think about the concept of intersectionality. Intersectionality is a concept that was developed by Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989. The concept was developed to understand and address the intersecting effects of marginalizing characteristics such as race, class, and gender, and how they contribute to individual social identities. And these various identities interact and shape their unique experiences of oppression and discrimination. So when we're working with an individual, we must consider all characteristics that marginalize them, because you could be looking at multiple levels of trauma. An example of intersectional identity is a Black lesbian woman. Black lesbian women exist at intersections of multiple marginalization, being that she's Black, she's a female, and that she's gay. And intersectionality also makes a person who's been marginalized vulnerable to experiences of trauma and other mental health issues.
And finally, the clinical implications. What does this mean for us as clinicians sitting across from individuals in these populations? I think it's important to point out that they don't need us to fix systemic racism or homophobia in that setting. They just need to be seen, heard, and validated. So that's where I think it's really important to notice that. And with any kind of trauma experience, a client that comes in experiencing trauma, it's easy for diagnosis of PTSD for clinicians to say, look, there's these external factors, right? These incidences that have shaped your experience, why you're here in this room. That doesn't always happen for these situations that involve discrimination. And so that's what we want to bring awareness to, recognizing these incidences as external factors contributing to their mental health, instead of saying, well, this is really your issue, it's internalized. And even if that were the case, it's still the client's perspective, right, that we're trying to heal and deal with. So we don't want to minimize or dismiss. We don't want to assume that these are just merely cognitive distortions that just need to be switched. We don't want to blame the victim, obviously, and we don't want to focus on them changing their reaction to the discrimination, but helping them move forward in a productive way. If they do want to address that discrimination, kind of moving down here to the bullet point, we want to encourage them to seek out support individuals in their institutions, the community, at work, at their institutions, helping them find individuals that can help them confront it in a productive and safe way. We want to validate, like I said, acknowledge that their feelings and experiences are products of discrimination. So, yes, microaggressions are real, homophobia is real, racism is real. We also want to acknowledge that there are certain parts they don't have control over, such as being born a black male in America. They didn't get to choose that, just like our players didn't get to choose what part they got. I kind of directed them to their seats. And we want to recognize our own implicit biases as clinicians. That's really important because we need to seek out, whether it's therapy or consultation or more experiences to help us really be there in a way that's helpful, so that, like my client that really had a poor experience with that uninformed and I think biased clinician, that was devastating to them. So we want to make sure that we don't obviously do that to the people sitting in front of us. So, and to end, Hiral?
Yeah. So in the words of, from the great movie, with great power comes great responsibility from Spider-Man. In a sense, we have a great power in a sense that when our clients come to us, they're in a very vulnerable position. Most of the time they're in a vulnerable position, and they also view us as experts in mental health. So it is our responsibility that we arm ourselves with knowledge, and we take responsibility to become aware of our implicit bias, because we are affecting and influencing their healing process, and we're influencing their transformation, as Michelle's talked about her client, where the client received misinformation from a previous therapist and it negatively impacted the client. So we want to be sure that we're not leading them down and further down in re-traumatization route.
Yes, and thank you for participating in our experience. Feel free to email us with any questions. We just have, actually I think we're right on time here, so we're going to just cite our sources, and thank you so much.